evening, breaking right now. According to the Daily Telegraph, Jonathan Powell, who's the head of national security, suppressed a major Whitehall investigation into Chinese spying after lobbying from the Treasury. This is the latest, really very serious development in this China spy scandal that is threatening to bring down this government. Powell decided in June that the government would not publish details about Beijing's espionage from the Foreign Office's own China audit. His decision came after the Treasury said that releasing information from the comprehensive analysis of China's influence in Britain could damage trade and investment links. The audit, promised in Labour's manifesto, became just 2 paragraphs in Powell's national security strategy. Wow. Huge news. This is the scandal that could bring down the Labour government. Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry were both accused of spying for China. They were arrested under the Official Secrets Act in March 2023. They were charged with espionage offences on the 22nd of April, weeks before Sir Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister. They always denied the charges, and they continue to deny the charges. But then, on the 15th of September, the charges were dropped, apparently because Labour did not want to say that China was a national security threat. Sir Keir Starmer, who's conveniently jetted off to India, blamed the Tories.
You have to prosecute people on the basis of the circumstances at the time of the alleged offence. And so all the focus needs to be on the policy of the Tory government in place then. That's the only place that the evidence could be focused on.
But now, this does not appear to be true. Governments and our intelligence services have repeatedly described China as a national security threat. And that revelation I brought you just at the top of this segment would indicate that this government was also acutely aware of the national security threat that China poses. And according to that, chose to suppress it. In 2023, the Tories described China as, quote, a threat to our people, prosperity and security. But look, don't take my word for it when it comes to being a little bit squiffy about all of this. The ex-head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, he's spoken out, contradicting Sir Keir Starmer. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson, has. Former Cabinet Secretary and Head of National Security, Lord Sedwill, has. And the former Head of the Civil Service, Simon Case. They have all come out and said, in a roundabout way, that they don't buy Sir Keir Starmer's excuses. And now more is emerging by the day. Sir Keir Starmer's national security advisor is that man called Jonathan Powell. And it turns out that he has held extensive meetings with Chinese communists personally and involving an organisation that he founded called Intermediate. This was revealed on Guido Fawkes earlier today. Chancellor Rachel Reeves inexplicably went to China whilst our economy was crashing here. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband went to China, signed a secret Green Deal. We are not allowed to know what was in that deal. And the Chagos Islands surrender. We were told that it was all about international law. Who helped to make that law? Well, it was Zhu Hanqin, a former official for the Chinese Communist Party. Who stands to benefit most from this Chagos deal? It's China, because they basically use Mauritius as a proxy state. Now, let's just remind ourselves of all of those big hitters who say that Sir Keir Starmer isn't being entirely honest about this China spy case. You've got the ex-head of MI6, you've got the Director of Public Prosecutions, you've got the former head of the Civil Service, you've got the former head of National Security. Do you believe them? Or do you believe the man who has repeatedly been accused of dishonesty? Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, he couldn't even be honest about this.
Now, soon after I became an MP, I went to Oldham for a by-election up there. I was taken to a street to meet a woman who I was told had strong views on immigration. I knocked on the door. She invited me in. We had a cup of tea and a rich tea biscuit.
Well, it turns out that he actually called her a racist. She booted him out of her house and then vowed to never vote Labour again. She testified to that, both in print and on GBNews. In my view, there are 2 possible explanations to what's going on here. Number 1, keeping China happy instead of prioritising our national security. Number two, that this government is in some way compromised by the Chinese communists. Now, there are very serious questions to answer as to whether or not our government is really working for us.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code, an account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just living credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponise against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel. We've got political commentator Chloe Dobbs, Tory peer Lord Bailey, and former Labour advisor Matthew Lars. Sean, I'm just going to come to you first on this. Those really damning revelations that have just come out as I was walking into the studio, actually, about Jonathan Powell and the suppression of intelligence about what a threat China is. Where are you at on this now?
Look, you don't need to convince me that China are a threat. I think what this shows is the Prime Minister's judgment is terrible. There is something that he needs to answer, and he should be beyond this questioning. The serious senior people who've come out against him, that is unprecedented. And it is now him versus them. If he doesn't have as convincing story as they are, I do now believe we're in the territory where Keir Starmer has to go. He really does have to go.
Chloe, is this what brings down the government?
I think it possibly could, or at least Keir Starmer. I mean, for a long time I've said that he's going to cling on. There's been a lot of talk with Andy Burnham and various others, but there's not a very clear successor to him, which might mean he clings on. But I think this is so serious. I mean, you've just read out the list of a load of huge, really senior individuals, not just a few journalists calling him out, calling him a liar. That really could tip him over the edge. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next week.
What is it then, Matthew? Do you think that this government has chosen misleading the British public to keep the Chinese happy, or are they compromised by Chinese communists?
I don't think they're compromised by Chinese communists. I think every British government has to walk a tightrope. We cannot pretend that we are not hugely economically integrated with China. You know, I don't know, you know, we're probably sitting on a sofa made in China, for example. People watching this on a TV made in China. So the idea that we can ignore China or treat it as a complete pariah state is just is not going to happen. And the Tories didn't do that. They had a very close relationship under David Cameron and George Osborne. But I think it's right that it's now more sceptical. I don't think that they are suppressing it. If you actually look at what happened is that rather than publishing the China audit separately, about 5 different things were wrapped up into one national security strategy. So that included other things like the Defence Strategic Defence Review, etc. And within the China audit, it begins, the China audit therefore recommends an increase in China capabilities across the national security system to strengthen our resilience and readiness. Right, that doesn't sound to me like sucking up to China.
Well, so hang on a minute, because I'm not entirely sure that it will be if there is some kind of compromising or whatever else that would bring him down, I think it would be a lie, the deceit. So if Sir Keir Starmer, which he's done, has gone on record whilst in India and said to the world, that the reason why we didn't prosecute here or we didn't give the evidence or whatever it was fundamentally because of a mistake from the last government, they didn't say that China was an enemy or a national security threat either. If it turns out that this government, his government, made a conscious decision to suppress intelligence on China or to not prosecute based on keeping China happy, that is a lie, isn't it? And he would have to go over that.
Look, I don't think that he's saying that. What he's saying is that in terms of directly interfering in the case, they've said that ministers weren't involved, and they've said that the court would have to rely on what the Tory government did because the alleged offences, which have now been dropped, took place under the Tory government. If that turns out not to be true, then he's going to have to face real questions. I don't think it's directly related to I wouldn't call it suppression, to the change in this report.
But what do you think about that? Is there some deceit going on here for you?
There's three things to look at here. First and foremost, why is this so complicated? Why was it such a major thing in their manifesto, then it disappeared when they came to government? That's the first thing. The second thing is as well is, what would this be like if the shoe was on the other foot? What would Keir Starmer be saying? Let's be very clear. We're only judging him by the standards that he set out when he was in opposition. He has to answer these questions, quite frankly, questions that shouldn't exist. That's the key thing. But the important thing here is for these senior figures to come out against him. It is almost an unwritten rule in our political system. When you're in a senior job like they do and you become former, you also become quiet. He has tested their integrity. They're now pushing back to test his. I think he has to answer that question. And the key thing is here, this now feels like Britain's national security is up for sale. As long as it's integrated with you enough, you can buy our silence. That is beyond the pale.
I just want to reiterate, this is breaking in the Daily Telegraph right now. This is what we're leading on. That Jonathan Powell, who's the top national security advisor for Sir Keir Starmer, according to them, suppressed a major Whitehall investigation into Chinese spying after lobbying from the Treasury. The Treasury basically said that if the reality was put out there, it would damage our trade relations, it would damage the British economy. Powell decided in June that the government would not publish full details about Beijing's espionage from the Foreign Office's China audit. And the reason why we're led to believe that this China trial, spy trial, has collapsed now is mainly because this government, as I understand it, did not want to describe China as an enemy or outline details about spying. Well, if Powell has suppressed it, then they have crashed the trial, haven't they?
Yes, I mean, it seems clear to me that the CPS have said the reason why this collapsed is because the government was supposed to provide information and evidence as to the extent of the threat that China poses, and they failed to do so. It is clear that that is the Labour government's responsibility, even if it is about something that happened back in 2023, and they haven't given the CPS the appropriate evidence. And you've got all of these people who have come out and said that MI5, MI6, the government, when the Tories were in power, clearly described China as a threat. It is clear as day that he is lying, and people are absolutely fed up of Keir Starmer's constant lies. And a lot of lies he's got away with to some extent in the past, maybe not in the polling, but he stayed in position. But this is one that really actually threatens our national security. And I think what has happened is that this government is so desperately trying to grow the economy. It's not exactly going very well. And so they can't possibly bear the thought of losing out on any trade deals with China, else Rachel Reeves is absolute toast.
Yeah, I mean, but for a party...
So they're willing to do anything, even if it threatens our national security quite seriously.
For a party and indeed now a Prime Minister that made such a virtue out of morality and principle.
Correct.
This seems quite surprising. But I do want to put a couple of things directly to you, which is that the allegation here would be that Sir Keir Starmer is not acting in Britain's best interests. And the second thing would be that he's a liar. Where are you on both of those things? Because they are obviously very big allegations.
Sure. I mean, look, Keir Starmer has to be held to the same standards as everybody else. So I don't think he has been lying, but if he's found to have lied, then clearly he's in trouble. But I don't think he has. But obviously, I may be proved wrong. In terms of not putting Britain's interests first, I don't agree with that. The actual section on China, which comes from this China audit, is pretty firm that we need to build our capability so we are better equipped to deal with the challenges and things like cybersecurity that come from China. So I don't think the government is saying that there's no problem with China. It's saying that there is.
We wouldn't have to do that, would we, if China wasn't a national security threat?
Correct.
Well, it basically says it's a national security threat. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand why in this case, in this court case, that wasn't said in the right place. But the government has clearly said that we need to be prepared better than we have been under any previous government for dealing with China.
So you've also got to bear in mind that at about 10 p.m. tonight, all of the newspapers drop. So the Telegraph have gone early with this, which is why we now know about the latest revelations. Keep your eyes and ears peeled, because last night the Times went very big on it as well. So there's a possibility that there's more to come. How do you see this playing out, Sean?
There's two things. Firstly, Labour's response to this has been a downgrading of China's risk to us as a nation, as opposed to what the previous Tory government was saying. How I see this playing out is Keir Starmer will have to wriggle. He's very, very lucky that there isn't a natural successor to him in the party, in his Labour Party. But I think the Labour Party internally, for its own survival, will now have to start to elevate certain people to take him on, because he is a busted flush. He has been in this position on so many occasions. Even if he survives this, he's weak, he's useless. The Labour Party, for their own good, now need to look at replacing Keir Starmer.
All right. Well, look, what I will say about this is, like I said, there's almost definitely going to be more to come tonight. So you need to stay glued to your TV screens or your radio sets. Keir Starmer, for his part, is staying firm on the idea that his hands were tied. This was the fault of the previous administration. Jonathan Powell, I imagine, would vociferously deny that he's done anything wrong in this particular case. And also, for what it's worth as well, both of the individuals who were charged with espionage, essentially, they do deny any wrongdoing. And, the case has collapsed, hasn't it? So, they can sleep easy at night.